You're all the same, the lot of you, with your long hair and faggot clothes. Drugs, sex, every sort of filth. And you hate the police, don't you? You make it easy.
You are listening to TMBDOS. They must be destroyed on sight. The following podcast may contain language and discussions of a frank and adult nature, and spoilers regarding the films discussed are always to be expected. Thank you for joining us. Now start the show, Dr. Rausch.
They must be destroyed on sight.
Hello and welcome to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, episode 134. I'm your host, Lee. I wish the dead could come back to life, you bastard, so then I could kill you again, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. The dead don't walk around except in very bad paperback novels, Harper. How you doing, sir?
I've got a bottle of Oktoberfest and doing well, basically.
Nice. So we're continuing our little trend of horror movies here. We're going to be looking at...
I was a little bit surprised at this one. There were no vampires.
Yeah.
I didn't know they made movies that didn't have vampires in them.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at Let Sleeping Corpses Lie, or also known as... Well, we'll get into what it's also known as when we get into the actual review from 1974. Quickly, I'll just mention something that I watched in the last little while. The other night, I just sort of was rolling around the more illicit places to find movies, Foot Locker, of course, and I looked into, I was like, you know what? I haven't seen a lot of Tony Scott films. I've avoided a couple of them just because they look like generic shit.
It's Tony Scott, right, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I love True Romance. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So I should give some more of his stuff a little bit of a go. And so I watched Revenge from 1990. Are you familiar with this one?
I haven't seen that one, no.
It's the one that is starring Kevin Costner, Madeleine Stowe, and Anthony Quinn. And it's sort of a...
Hold on, this movie was made in 1990, you said?
Yes.
Oh, man, I never would have thought.
But it's sort of a neo-noir in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually really good. Kevin Costner plays this retiring Air Force pilot who goes down to Mexico to meet up with his basically mob boss friend in Anthony Quinn, and maybe Anthony Quinn kind of wants him to work for him eventually or something along those lines. But he sort of falls in love with Anthony Quinn's trophy wife, and they have an affair, and they get found out. And Anthony Quinn takes, I'll just say, brutal revenge on both of them. And then the rest of the story is Kevin Costner recovering from this revenge and then going after Anthony Quinn for what he did. And it's really good. I was pleasantly surprised with how good it was. It maybe kind of wraps up a little too quickly, like in the last 15 minutes, all the real action sort of happens and it kind of wraps up. But up until then, it like works really well. In a way, it's kind of like an updated version of Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia in a way, just as the sort of like travel log aspects of it, going through Mexico or whatever. All the different weird people that Kevin Costner sort of meets up with as he's trying to bite and claw his way back to life and get revenge on Anthony Quinn. And I liked it a lot. I think it's one we should do on the podcast at some point.
Sounds like it. It sounds like the next crime movie series we need to throw that in. Or noir, if we're going to do like strict noir again. I don't know what, but yeah, it sounds definitely like something we should do.
It's brutal, though. Like what they do to Madeleine Stowe to get revenge on her. Oh, man. And it's also got Thomas Millian, who we've seen in some spaghetti westerns and such.
Nice.
On the podcast before, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely down. We can throw on Body Heat. I know you've never seen Body Heat, and
right.
That's one of those classic. You know, you've got to see Body Heat. It sounds very different in terms of plot, but it might have a kind of similar kind of tone in some ways. So we'll definitely have to check that out sometime as well.
It's funny. I don't know if it's something that Tony Scott liked from his male leads or not, at least his white male leads, because, I mean, he worked with Denzel Washington quite a bit in a lot of his films.
Yeah.
So
I actually really like Man on Fire. Like Man on Fire is a really underrated film. Sorry, please continue.
Kevin Costner looks in several shots in this. He looks so much like Christian Slater does in True Romance. It's the same kind of like hairstyle almost, and
right, yeah.
And the way they squint and stuff like that.
Well, they're only a few years apart. True Romance is what, 92 or 93?
92, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of that era, and the thing with Tony Scott was he's a guy who he did like Top Gun and shit. He was one of those deeply commercial directors who kind of just in some ways followed the trends and in some ways just kind of did the big bombastic version of whatever was on trend at any given time. And so you don't go to Tony Scott for restraint.
No, not at all.
Yeah, Domino would be another one that would be fun to do.
Yeah, that one's got Tom Waits as a crazy preacher that she meets up with in the desert.
The only thing you need to know about Domino is it's got Keira Knightley flirting with Lucy Liu.
That works too.
That's it. That's it.
So we can take a quick break here, and we'll play a little bit of music, some podcast promos, and we'll come back with Let Sleeping Corpses Lie.
You ungodly warlock.
You go through your week with the same old routine.
What you really want is some blood and thunder in your life.
Well, friend, you found it.
The Cromcast is an adventurous journey through the history of two-fisted pulp stories.
With your hosts, John,
Josh,
and Luke.
We have action,
horror,
and adventure, all through the lens of pulp luminary Robert E. Howard.
Don't just stay in your ordinary life.
Find your pulp life at thecromcast.blogspot.com.
The Cromcast.
The Cromcast.
The Cromcast.
A podcast for the barbarian at heart.
Badasses, Boobs, and Body Counts is a weekly podcast that discusses all things grindhouse, exploitation, drive-in, and B-movies. Your three hosts, Mike.
We're going to discuss the Rene Martinez directed picture, The $6,000.
What? Wait, whoa.
That's the name of the movie.
Super Soul Brother.
That's the name.
When you start the movie,
look at your DVD cover.
When you start the movie, the first thing that comes up is the title, and it says
$6,000.
Mark.
And I've been around a girl stroking a horse's dick.
Somehow, somewhere down the line, I'm going to use that clip against you.
Shh. Please do.
And listener favorite Iris.
The deployment sock. And I'm like, deployment sock? What the fuck is a deployment sock? He goes, that sock that you just use? Oh my God, you guys are so gross. See, so it happens for real. People do come in socks.
We'll make you question your political correctness while laughing at theirs. Episodes drop Sunday and can be found by searching for BB and BC Podcast via iTunes, Libsyn, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and everywhere else you can download quality podcasts from. You can also listen to episodes directly from the show's website at bbandbcpodcast.com.
Hello and welcome to Hello, This is the Doom Show. I'm Richard.
And I hate the burning.
Shh, who are you? Speak.
And I'm Brad.
She came in and said, "Buck, buck, buck," and he said, "Buck, buck, buck," and she said, "Buck, buck, buck, buck." That's what I got.
One is the Suspiria boner. The other is the Inferno boner. Anyway.
Which one is crying? The boner of tears.
Hello, This is the Doomed Show is available on hellodoomedshow.podomatic.com and doomedmoviethon.com.
Hello, this is the Doom Show. Richard, Brad, Jeffrey, Naffa. It's the Doom Show. Hello, this is the Doom Show. Slashers, giallo, and horror.
You ungodly warlock.
Okay, Let Sleeping Corpses Lie from 1974.
Anyone about?
Hey! You've shut us in!
It's not my fault, Sergeant, if Christ and saints are out of fashion. Satan's all the rage these days.
Listen, boy, you keep getting on my nerves, and I'm going to give you another kind of house to look after. One with lots of bars in the windows.
We'd better reinforce that door. Take the lamp.
I can just imagine the sergeant's face when he finds out.
Craig, can you hear me?
Sergeant, they're dead people trying to kill me!
Message for you.
Look, I know it sounds silly, but is it possible? I mean, could a film fail to catch an image for any reason?
Well, a ghost, maybe.
They tampered with nature. Now they must pay the price. See the grotesque invade an unsuspecting village. See a hospital panic when day-old babies go berserk. See friends turn on each other in a nightmare of horror. You'll cringe with terror when you see. Don't open the window. Whatever's out there will wait. Rated R.
And it's also known as, and these are just the other English titles. There's several foreign language titles that this comes under as well. But it's also known as The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue, The Living Dead. It's Zombie 3 at one point. They tried to shoehorn it into the Italian zombie movie series. Don't Open the Window, which is one of the more perplexing ones. Do Not Speak Ill of the Dead as well. I guess it was Edgar Wright who did one of the Grindhouse trailers, the one Don't. This was one of the movies that inspired that sort of idea. Because there were a bunch of movies that had that sort of like, don't open the window, don't go in the basement, don't go in the woods. So
Don't use ground penetrating radar on corpses, apparently.
Yeah. This is directed by Jorge Grau. written by Juan Cabos, Sandro Constanzia, whatever. Marcelo.
The greatest thing about doing Italian films on this podcast is listening to Lee completely butcher every single name.
I got Jorge Grau right.
You did, yes.
But I researched that one.
Yeah.
I looked up the pronunciation because otherwise I just would have said George Grau. Miguel Rubio. It is starring Christina Galbo as Edna Simmons, Ray Lovelock as George Meaning, and Ray Lovelock is actually an Italian actor. That just happened to be his name. He just had like a sort of a Western name, more Western name. Arthur Kennedy as the inspector. I know Arthur Kennedy from one other film. I've probably seen him in other stuff, but I know him from Lawrence of Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
He was in that, yeah. Aldo Massasso as Kinsey. Giorgio Tristini as Craig, Roberto Posse as Benson, Jose Lefont as Martin West, Janine Mestra as Katie West. I'm assuming this is Ginger Gotti as Keith. I didn't look at the pronunciation, but I think that's just like a different way of saying ginger. Either that or it's Ginger. And
I think it's Genghis Khan. I think that's
Genghis Khan. Yeah. And Fernando Hilbeck as Guthrie Wilson. And we do have this is going back to our talk of IMDb reviewers and synopsis leavers from last week. There's 2 on the IMDb page from the same person. So they decided to write 2.
They did it once and then went back and did the second. I can do that better. And then so.
But there was also one other one that was actually way better than the 2 that this person provided. But I just wanted to put these 2 in the limelight here. So Jojo Mack writes, first, a cop chases 2 young people visiting the English countryside, suspecting them of local murder. Unbeknownst to him, the real culprits are living dead, brought to life with a thirst for human flesh by radiation being used by area farmers as a pesticide alternative. His second one. This might actually be the earlier one, because I think he kind of maybe didn't watch the film first, then watched the film and corrected himself. It says, a cop chases 2 hippies suspected of a series of Manson family-like murders. Unbeknownst to him, the real culprits are the living dead brought to life with the thirst for human flesh by chemical pesticides being used by area farmers. So I think someone actually watched the film after they wrote the synopsis and then was like, oh shit, I don't know how to delete my old one.
It sounds like the first one was, I read the back of the VHS box.
Maybe, yeah.
Wrote it, and then, that feels a little bit like came out of Leonard Maltin's pen or something,
Yeah, Leonard Maltin.
It's just that level of cheese that the second one definitely. We always appreciate editing skills, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Making your writing better. Bravo to you.
Yeah.
Pseudonymous IMDb commenter.
But yeah, you're fairly close in both of them, really. I mean,
it's a pretty straightforward plot, really, and captured it pretty well. There are a lot of sideline characters that our synopsis writer didn't get into, and which are kind of pointless to bother getting into. To some degree. There's a lot of there's a lot of kind of sideline people who kind of show up and have things to do in this movie and then die, and come back to life and then kill other people. If you wanted to, just to let you know, not you, Lee, but the audience, the synopsis on Wikipedia is something like 8 paragraphs long, and probably about 3 of them are actually worthwhile.
Yeah. So this is actually a Spanish-Italian co-production. So, although it was mostly filmed in Italy, and there's a couple different places in the UK that was filmed, because it's supposed to be set in Somerset, I believe. Although, which makes it weird that they call the title "The Living Dead" in Manchester Morgue. But I guess maybe the morgue is over in Manchester. I don't know how far away that is from Somerset. So whatever. But
if only we knew some British people or had access to Google Maps.
Yeah. I'm not going that deep into the research. Come on now.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one I've I've seen multiple times, so I'm assuming this is your first watch.
My first viewing. I really enjoyed this, despite the fact that I was kind of dinging it for being slightly overplotted and kind of underplotted at the same time. The thing that I really appreciated about it is that this does, more than any film I've seen not directed by George Romero, it feels like it could have been directed by George Romero.
Yeah.
And I mean that as not as a ripoff, not as kind of a. It doesn't feel like kind of that, zombie craze. We're just going to kind of do the gore and, make something cheesy and stupid. And, once it gets to 82 minutes, just to cut it off. I mean, it feels like this is trying to kind of do something interesting and different with its concept. It's got some really nice score effects. I really appreciated some of the look of the film. But overall, I mean, I kept, particularly at the beginning when we do kind of get this kind of couple, this boy and a girl kind of hanging out in the car. It does feel a little bit like Night of the Living Dead, like that opening 10 minutes of Night of the Living Dead just kind of extends for the first half of the film in a lot of ways. It also does have that kind of dynamic of, the hippies kind of being attacked. They're not really hippies. I mean, I don't know. They kind of gesture at this a little bit. It's a little bit kind of unclear exactly what they're trying to do. But I mean, there is a sense of kind of the old man, the old conservative, right-wing cop, not liking the kids with their long hair and their rock music these days, And Arthur Kennedy is, I can't tell if he's dramatically overacting or if he's acting this perfectly. That's kind of the key to understanding that performance is I can't tell if he's right on point with this or if he's really, really bad. But he was a delight in the film. But yeah, no, it kind of has that going on. It does feel like there's a brain in its head. It does feel like something that it does feel like it's much more thoughtful than a film of this kind necessarily has to be. And I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's on my kind of best of list, but it's close. It's definitely really, really enjoyable, and it's one that I would probably revisit at some point.
Nice. Yeah, this is one that's kind of flown under the radar for a long time. Like, it was just kind of like the DVD era kind of brought this back into more public attention. Because, I mean, with the multiple titles, and that's kind of what kept me away from it, and I suspect that's maybe what kept a lot of people away from it, was the fact that it was under so many multiple titles. Like, when you kind of see that, you kind of think, okay, this film's probably crap. Because they
just kind of repackage it over and over again for, whatever, and it's just schlock. But no, this isn't that at all. This has a real, it's got real talent behind it. It looks gorgeous. I don't know, the version, I definitely did not watch the version on Rare Lust. I absolutely... this one, I could not find this legally available to stream anywhere. Amazon has the DVD, so you can get the DVD, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But it is not available to stream, and so I did not feel bad about, taking a copy for viewing. And but the version that I saw looked gorgeous. So really nice photography and really, a really like clean print. So that's always nice to see with films of this era as well.
Yeah, I'm sure 80-year-old Jorge Grau doesn't feel bad about you watching the film for free at this point. But yeah, this is surprisingly really good. It is obviously heavily inspired by George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And this precedes the Italian zombie boom by about 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it precedes Dawn of the Dead by, Dawn of the Dead is 78. Is it 78 or 79?
78.
78, yeah. Yeah, so it precedes that even by 4 years. So it does feel like kind of an updating and a slightly bigger budget version of Night of the Living Dead in a lot of ways. And
yeah, it does.
That, in a positive way. It even feels like bits of it feel inspired by the Crazies. With the kind of ground penetrating radar, and there's a bit about kind of radiation suits and stuff that. It does feel like this is somebody who had a nice kind of awareness of Romero's work. I've got a cat playing with my microphone. One second. Come on. She's a little like poking her head on the microphone to make me pat her. Good job. Anyway, no, it does feel like this is that someone who had a very up to the moment at that time awareness of Romero's work, was a real appreciator of it, and was kind of, I don't want to say this is an homage, but was inspired by it, and kind of did his own version of it, and I think on that level it works perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, he directly lifts like several elements. I mean, there's the zombie attacks the girl in the car. He sort of does that sequence twice. Like so he repeats that. The zombies themselves they start off like Romero zombies,
right?
But that's the interesting twist on this, and this is what I really like. Grau tries to, within the context of the film, tries to make everything seem scientifically plausible, like so these people are from the environmental department are using this new pesticide control, and it's chemical free. It's this sonic radiation device thingy, and it looks perfectly credible. Like, it looks like any piece of heavy machinery you'd see out in a field somewhere, right? Kind of thing.
I mean, at first it looks a little bit like a metal detector that they stuck little antennae on.
Yeah,
which I thought was a very kind of goofy looking device, but something that you could imagine maybe that actually does have some kind of utility of some kind.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a thing like that. That's something you see once and then you basically forget about. The primary thing is the truck. And
then later on they've got the big truck. Yeah,
that's got the big emitters on top. So basically, what this does is, the sonic radiation from the truck apparently stimulates the nervous system of insects because their nervous systems are not as complex as ours, apparently. So it makes them go into overdrive and become hyper-violent and aggressive, and they end up killing each other. And basically that's the way it wipes out the bugs. The unforeseen side effects is that the recently dead's nervous systems that are perhaps still working, much like they make the...
Much like when you pluck a flower.
Yes.
It lives for a little while. In much the same way, people like flowers. That's the.
Yeah, they throw that stuff in there, and as you're watching the film, you kind of buy it because it's like, yeah, it works in the context of this film. And then also there's the unforeseen side effect of babies who have not yet a fully developed nervous system going hyper-violent. There's that brief little scene in the hospital where the babies are like biting people, and which is neat. I like that. But so there's some thought behind how everything works in this film, which I really appreciate. It explains a lot more than what Romero's film did, where it leaves it up to you, like, what's bringing the zombies back? Here, it's obviously this machine.
It's not hard for this. You could imagine this being like the real, like, kind of origin story of the zombies in Night of the Living Dead in a lot of ways. It just turned out like, it was this ground penetrating radar thing. I mean, even though the rules of the zombies work differently, but Night of the Living Dead doesn't explain anything, and it's so kind of vague about that stuff that it's not. I mean, it is not hard to see this as sort of like the real backstory of Night of the Living Dead in some ways.
Yeah, and so the zombies, the way they spread the zombification around in this one is, I guess they carry the radiation in them somehow. Like, that's where it gets a little bit convoluted.
I thought they said something like they were transferring the blood, like they needed the blood of the living, and then they could transfer that blood to other corpses, and then that's how they said. So it sort of justifies, we have to kill living people and then like go to other corpses and then to bring in, that gets a little, but it's really just a justification for like some really, I mean, and I use this word knowing what I'm saying, some really glorious cannibalism scenes.
Yeah,
some of the most effective people eating people stuff I've seen anywhere, and that's impressive.
I wish I could find the budget for this because there is some money laid down here on the effects. It looks really good. I mean, there's one effect near the end there where, like, the big finale's in the hospital where one of these infected zombies is brought into the hospital, and then just all shit fucking breaks loose because of all they have the morgue downstairs or whatever, so a bunch of corpses there get infected with the radiation and so forth, But there's the scene with the nurse that they attack, and apparently the actress that they picked for this was flat-chested, so they could build the breast prosthetic on there for that whole scene. But yeah, and like you mentioned, it is sort of like the opening is much like the opening in Night of the Living Dead. But this couple, they're not brother and sister, and they're not boyfriend or girlfriend. They're just two people who have been thrust together by circumstance, basically. And also because Ray Lovelock's character is kind of an asshole.
Oh, yeah, no. The first few minutes are definitely make this guy the biggest asshole we can possibly make him. to the degree that you almost, I kind of thought he was going to die very early on. He was that much of an asshole. One thing that, I mean, and this is just kind of talking about these kind of movies in general, is that, again, like Deathline, you could, if you didn't know what this was and you didn't know the title, you could kind of walk into this and think it could kind of be anything based on that first, 15, 20 minutes. I mean, this could be kind of a little romantic comedy. They kind of made me wish that Jennifer Lopez or somebody would make a movie where it's like, oh, The Wedding Planner, and then like halfway through it's like, oh no, really this is a zombie movie.
That would be fun.
There really is a sense that, if you did kind of wander into this not knowing anything about it, you could be completely misled about what kind of movie you're watching for a good half of this film, because it starts off as this sort of little, kind of meet cute between these two, between the asshole and the beautiful redhead, where they're kind of hanging out, and you think, well, they're going to bang later, that's going to be great, and then it becomes this sort of murder mystery thing that has this kind of maybe supernatural bent, or maybe this, it's not clear what's going on. And then only, kind of towards the end does it really become, like straight up zombie horror film. And I really like the way it transitions between those things. It's definitely got that genre mashup thing in a way, again, and it feels very modern. It feels very 21st century. But it is the sort of thing to where, walking into this and kind of knowing it's a zombie film, you do sort of, or at least a horror film, you do sort of like run into the, why am I watching 20 minutes with these people chatting with you? Like there's a little bit like, and that's where, some of the kind of, there are a lot of people in this doing things, but not really to any great effect. That's kind of where we get to ding it, where, it is kind of like, we kind of walked into this movie for zombies, and instead there's a photographer and his girlfriend, and there's a pharmacist, and stuff is happening, and there's a murder investigation, and that guy's an asshole. If there's a bigger asshole than our lead here, it's definitely the detective, which is
I mean, Ray Lovelock's character, he's basically just, he's kind of the antisocial, urbane guy, modern dude who seems like he's a real massive dick, but by the time we get to the end of the film, you're like, nah, he's actually a really decent guy, and he tries to do the right thing and tries to save the day, And then you just...
I mean, he's willing to save the world. He's just a deep misogynist. That's really
and Arthur Kennedy, who's just the stereotypical... I assume alcoholic, sort of slightly Scottish cop who who wants to pin this on these hippies with their faggot clothes, and like that's the classic quote, and you'll probably hear that at the beginning of the episode, by the way, as a little stinger. But
he does feel like he's like perpetually 2 minutes away from killing the kid and then planting a gun on him. Like there is that, like, oh no, I know you did it. We're just looking for the reason you did it, or the way to prove that you did this. There's no sense that this guy is actually trying to be an investigator. Which, for a while I was kind of like, it's going to kind of give me that kind of Fargo structure where it's going to, kind of be about like this thing that happened, and then we're going to follow the detective around, and he's going to be our lead, or kind of like Deathline does, where it did kind of remind me a little bit of Deathline, which I guess is only a year or two difference. So, it kind of makes sense, but it kind of gave me a little bit of that vibe, but then it goes in a completely different direction with that character as well. So again, nicely done. It mixes it up pretty well.
Yeah, and I like how all these sort of elements, you're right, like for a little while you start to get, okay, where's this going to go? But it all sort of comes together really quickly near the end. Like by the time you get halfway through the film, all the stuff sort of starts coming together really quick. Yeah. Like you got the sister of our main lead, who's a heroin addict, and her husband, and they've been having problems. The husband's the photographer. And I like how the main reason the police have nothing else to go on other than these two are probably murderers or somehow involved in these killings is because you don't have these big waves of zombies or anything like you would in Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
You just have the one zombie carrying the radiation around, and when it can find more corpses to put the radiation into, then you get more zombies. But until then, you don't get that. And also, I like how they're constantly working on that fucking machine. When they're starting out, it only goes a mile. But halfway through the film, or near the end of the film, it's like, we've boosted it to 5 miles. Now all of a sudden, anything that's died within 5 miles can now get up and start going around killing people.
Right.
which is just, it's a nice little way to inject a little bit more tension into the plot, and also
it's still got that sort of slightly low key kind of thing where it's not like, and now it works over 1,000 miles because where this, it's not like, oh, and now this is going to be all of Europe is going to have this problem. It's still, it has I really like it when these things stay kind of small scale and kind of the larger world is implied.
Yeah, and I like how the soundtrack aside, like the score, the music is good, but how within the sort of the soundtrack, whenever you see one of the zombies, or every once in a while one of the characters, you'll just start hearing that humming of the machine in the background, and it just kind of keeps reminding you that this is happening like all the time, like it's still going and going and going. I do have a question, and I do want to ask you on this, whether you think there's any supernatural elements to this. Because even though the zombies seem to be created by scientific means, essentially, there's the part with the photograph where they were looking on the photograph reel to see if they got a picture of the zombie, and the zombie's not in the photograph at all. And so, do you think it's maybe some effect of the radiation is like shielding them from being photographed, or what?
I think that the film sort of treats, vitalism as kind of valid science, basically. And vitalism being the idea that there is some, like essence of life that is, like there's some substance in, living tissue that just sort of like makes it alive, as opposed to it being a sort of the nature of like a pattern of like chemistry and biology that sort of makes things alive versus dead. And this is, This is pretty common in kind of folk versions of these kinds of stories, that there's that essentially there's some like smoke, or there's some like I mean, literally the word spirit means breath, and so
right.
so it is so that, but there was certainly this idea that there was some kind of scientific justification. Certainly not in 1974, but I mean it is kind of as late as kind of the early 19th century. That was pretty establishment kind of view, and I just kind of view it as it kind of is playing on those kinds of ideas, in which it's the whole thing of like, well, a flower is still alive for a while after you pick it, and therefore like kind of human beings can still have that essence of life in them, and that if you kind of reanimate it by some like sonic means, it sort of plays by like kind of vaguely scientific rules, even though it's obvious kind of bunk. It's not kind of real, but it doesn't really kind of dig into this. It doesn't dig into the rules, which is one of the things I like about it. It just kind of presents it as a thing. But I think it's probably something that you could probably you can kind of squint and nod along with it and kind of go, yeah, that sort of makes sense. I mean, I don't necessarily think that it's tipping its hand either way. I mean, basically, what I'm saying is I think the film like kind of plays. It is not kind of doing this kind of overtly supernatural reading, but it exists in a world in which science does not work the way science works in our world. Right.
Right. Yeah. I was just kind of wondering, because although Jorge Grau, there, I just did it. Jorge Grau. Fuck me. Jorge Grau sort of, although he gives more explanation for his zombies than Romero did in the first Night of the Living Dead, he still kind of hints here and there that, there might be alternate explanations going on, or alternate things going on. Because another thing I noticed, these zombies, they go up quick. Like you set them on fire. That's the way to destroy them, by the way. Like you can't, destroy the brain and then the ghoul is dead or whatever. You have to actually set them on fire, and they go up like, they're like dry hay. Right. So there's almost like a kind of slightly supernatural element to it. Or maybe it's just, again, it's debunked science. Oh, the radiation that they're soaked with makes them highly flammable.
It turns out that the radiation turns all of the water in their system to acetone.
And also there's the weird thing of the first zombie we see, who's this local like bum who just wanders around and begs for money, but apparently he died a week earlier by drowning. Every time you see him, he's wet. So that's kind of a weird thing too. Like it almost makes you think either he goes back to the river periodically, or there's something like this, some other weird thing going on. I mean, the zombies in this, they're definitely a lot smarter than the Romero zombies. They can reason things out. They can attack with weapons. They seem to have some slight sense of consciousness and purpose, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end, and spoilers, if you haven't seen this movie, you know, you might want to shut off now, but our heroes all die at the end. But, but our hero Ray Lovelock comes back and gives Arthur Kennedy his wish, who, you know, Arthur Kennedy is saying, I wish you would come back so I could kill you again. He comes back and he gets Arthur Kennedy, which is awesome, by the way. I love that. But it shows there's more purpose. There's more going on in the zombies' heads than just, I want to eat your flesh kind of thing. So, which is ironically the way that the Romero zombie movies would go, you know, kind of with Land of the Dead, and you know some of the later ones definitely have a more of a sense of sort of intelligent zombies, or the zombies are, which you know, who knows? Romero may have. I mean, I'm sure Romero saw this at some point, and might have, You know, one of the things I really liked was the just the effect of the zombies kind of rising from. You know, there's this really nifty. It just looks really cool to see them. You know, kind of because it feels like they're like being pulled up with strings almost, you know. They rise kind of like Nosferatu, kind of. Yeah, very much so. And it was well enough done that it was not immediately obvious to me how they achieved the effect, which is something that's nice in a film from 1974, where I'm like, oh, that actually looks like creepy and interesting, and, you know, like a really nifty little special effect that is, you know, subtle but also really effective. Either that or those zombies did a hell of a lot of ab crunches. Like they just, they could just, I can just sit up on a dime. You know, they had abs of steel like 10 years before that was the thing. You know? I don't know if I have anything else to say. Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like I really like this, but it's kind of straightforward. It's like, yeah, this is really good. Check it out. There is the sort of, I guess I could mention there is a sort of environmental message. Like again, that sort of goes back to Romero, kind of, you know, put your thoughts on your sleeve kind of thing. And Grau, I think, does it here. Like the opening montage of rural to city. You'll notice like all the shots of the city, it's people looking cramped and mad and sick and smoke and fumes and pollution, and then you see like the beautiful rural landscape, and then basically this movie's about that being intruded upon by civilization, kind of thing. Yeah, you get a streaker with an afro, by the way, too. Yeah, no, there was a streaker. I was like, oh, look, how nice, you know. I have a hard time, you know, kind of looking negatively on those city scenes, just because, like, oh, look, it's Italy in the 70s. I want to go have a cappuccino now. You know, it's just very. It was. I was really surprised, just kind of watching it, that they were pretending that any of this was set in Britain. You know, like, oh no, this is not clearly Italy in 1973. No, not at all. No, they tried their best, because, again, like I said, they did shoot some stuff in the English countryside, but most of it was Italy. Like they did do like the Greater Manchester, Barnes Hospital, and Cheadle, and a couple other places. The church scenes were shot, I believe, in England, but then like all the countryside and most of the town stuff you see otherwise is obviously Italian. It's just, you know, and I mean, they've got most of the people. I think maybe Ray Lovelock might be doing a British accent, but pretty much everybody else in this is dubbed except for Arthur Kennedy, because you don't have to dub him. He's just doing a bad Scottish accent. Right. DVD info for this. Anchor Bay released this on DVD in 2000. That's out of print. Of course, Blue Underground picked it up, like they did just basically everything Anchor Bay made. They picked it up in 2007. That's the one I own. They also did a 2-disc DVD in 2016. And weirdly enough, the Blu-ray preceded that. The same edition preceded that in 2009 from Blue Underground. So those are all ways you can see that. I believe it's also on YouTube, Rare Lust. And like you said, is it streaming on Amazon or? It is not. No? It's one of those where I think there's probably a rights issue, because it's got the not available to stream on the surface at this time, which is usually a sign that
two giant corporations are fighting over something,
Yeah.
So, and that's the moment where I'm like, well, there's a reason that I saw a tweet. I retweeted it this a couple of days ago, which is something that I definitely agree with, which was when these kinds of films are not readily available on DVD to purchase, and when there is no legal streaming option available for this kind of stuff, pirating it is actually it's actually kind of a work of archiving. It's sort of you did not give me an easy way to access this, so you, giant company, are making this harder to get. You are making this go away, and it is fans of it and people talking about it that are going to keep it alive. And so I feel no feel no guilt over having pirated this. So if I get sued by a giant corporation, I will feel bad. But until then,
yeah, come at us, bro. Fucking whatever.
No, please don't. Actually, please do not come after us. I do not have any money. It is fine. I'm not going to prison for 10 years for or paying a $50,000 fine for pirating. Let sleeping corpses lie. I don't like it that much, but it would be really nice if all you companies would get your shit together and just make this stuff like a $2 rental already.
Yeah,
just get over yourselves.
Digital rights are just bullshit at this point. It's just it's nonsense. It's just you're actually stopping yourself from making money.
I would absolutely have done a $2 or $3 rental for this. I do it all the time for these movies. I would have had no issue doing that. You did not make it available to me, and therefore I don't feel bad.
Yep. People actually like to pay for art.
I will pay, particularly for stuff that is older, particularly for stuff that is and this is a really good looking print that I watched.
Mm-hmm.
And this looked good. It wasn't kind of one of those cheapy, just kind of throw it out things. I absolutely would have happily paid the biggest company in the world a few dollars to get to watch this. And unfortunately, I didn't have that as an option. So
yeah. So don't know what we're gonna watch next time. I got to figure that out. I've got all next week off, and maybe I can finally get around to brokering some sort of guest spot deals that we're planning on doing in this sort of horror cycle. So that might happen. We'll see what happens. We'll let you guys know. Daniel, where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on Twitter at Daniel E. Harper. I do a podcast called Wrong with Authority. That's wrongwithauthority.libsyn.com. And that is a podcast about movies about history and the history they're about. That's the thing that I'm doing the most right now. So go check that out.
Yeah, and you can find us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can find our Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Facebook links. Join the Facebook group. They Must Be Destroyed on Sight on Facebook. I have not yet changed it to They Must Be Destroyed, like we discussed an episode ago or so. I just forgot. I haven't seen if I can do it yet. It might happen. But yeah, that would be the best place to find out what's coming up next on the podcast. So if you want to join up there, and every once in a while people post interesting things. It's not a super busy movie group, but at the same time, we've never had one asshole on the group either. So
except for us, it's just us. We're the assholes, which tells you all you need to know, really.
But yeah, until then, thank you, Daniel, and thank you all for listening. And we will see you next episode. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
You've been listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For other episodes, our Apple Podcast, YouTube, and Facebook group links, as well as podcasts and websites of similar interest, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. Thank you. Drive through.